This is Kitzur Yomi as we continue learning Simin Mem Beis, the halachais of Hanhogas during a Suda. We'll be concluding these halachais, moving on to Simin Mem Gimel. We're up to Simin Mem Beis, Sif Chav teaches the Kitzur. If you're eating as a guviyat success and some of them left. Al dashi achzur lekan with the intention to come back. So if even just one of them is here, it's not considered as if they've finished. And therefore, therefore, when they return to the original meal. And it's not a problem. It's not considered a hefsek. And now Sivchav Aleph says the Kitzur. So when you're making the hamaitzi, now we're going to Hilchos Brachos. Very important. After you eat hamaitzi, you plan to go somewhere else. To finish the Suda there. No 55 points out from the Mishnah Berurah, as the Kitzur will get to eventually, that you should really have this das when you're washing Tilas Yadayim, and you want to bench there. You're going to a neighbor, you're going to a simcha, you're going to shul, and you plan on benching there. No yagin lahatir. It is customary to say it's mutter. Sarchli Zayir, be careful. Lechol Kamsham Lechol Apachos K'zayis, pass you sheet over there. Lechol Afachot, at least a K'zayis. However, Vein Lasses Kain, Ella Le'isat Sayrech, Lisudas Mitzvah. Note 56 says, Mishnah Berurah says, this is allowed indiscriminately, and one does not have to be worried about the level of Tsayrech, which the Kitzur here says is necessary, and avada, that's going to be the psak halacha. But we'll mention that maybe there should be some level of need, but the Mishnah Berurah does not feel that that is necessary. So when David's during a meal, when he comes back to eat, sometimes Shabbos day, you could have a mincha, and other reasons, you don't make another hamaitzi. You took a nap in the middle of the meal, you fell asleep. Not that your mom went into bed, you fell asleep at the table, note 57 says. He says, man, even though it was some amount of time. Loi mikri hefsek v'chein, and similarly. Hefsek b'shar divrei rishos, if there were other issues, kigoin. They had to use the bathroom. A new netilas yadayim is needed. Unless, as we learned already, Elam Kain Shami Yadav. Unless you guarded your hands, unless you made sure not to touch a Makam Mitanov. Ach Layavarich al Netil, you do not have to make a bracha on that until Sidayim, Kim Shemesach Hadas in Mavarchim al Haniti La. No 62 does point out that the Biur Halacha seems to indicate that there would be a bracha until Sidayim, but again, not so simple. When you finish your meal and you decide to bench, you're done. Then you're like, oh, you know what? I want to eat a little more. It's not simple. Note 63 says you might even have to watch Chelsea Dayan again. So the Kitzur just says, don't do it. And don't cause any issues. Simin Mem Gimel, and we continue with Hilchos Brachos. Says the Kitzur, whatever you eat during a meal. Note 1 says from the Mishnah Berurah, what's a meal? A meal is bread. Items that you normally during a meal to satisfy your hunger. Meat and fish, lift them, other condiments, pancakes, regular food items that fill you up, items that are normally part of a meal. You eat it without bread. Now you might say, even though, and the answer is yes, because this is a debate in the Rishonim, but Avad is how we paskin. Kula meinu tzarich bracha. In the middle of a meal, you don't have to make a new bracha. Lo lefneim, lo lachreyem. Shekiva and she'ich lenes on this baya. You even have to satisfy yourself. Harim b'chal suda. V'chol asud nigreres achar alecha. And the whole suda goes after the bread. Shu ikar chayodam. That's ikar sustenance of a person. Ulechein kula niftar miberach zamaitzi uberach zamazayin. Everything is part of the suda. Even if the food came from other houses, why does some of das adam? What's your das? You need a meal. I'll call mashi aviloi, whatever they bring you during the meal. And similarly, we continue to base. Drinks are part of a meal. You don't eat without drinking. Chutz, of course. Except for wine. Many times you have to make a bracha. So the Shabbos Suda, you already made Kiddush, you already made Agafen. But let's say someone's at a simcha, someone's at a restaurant, they order wine. You need to make a bracha during a meal. Let's say you made a bracha on wine in proximity to the meal. Note 9 says, similarly, if you make Kiddush before a Suda, delicious, and you adas to drink it during the meal as well, which generally is our stamdas. Because you're exempt alav levnei asuda ayin leel. V'yayin tzarav l'mdinaseinu. What about liquor? What about schnapps? You don't normally have it during a meal. It's a suffix if it's considered part of the meal. If you can have some schnapps, it's best to have a little bit before you wash your hands, before the Suda starts. Less than a gezayis and avada what yivarich lav yimeka shakol. V'yachavin you have a mind lifter gam mashishta b'toch hasuda we're going to drink during the meal. V'im lo yasakim. What if you didn't do that? Yivarich. So says the Kitzur, it's a suffix. So what do you do with a suffix? Says the Kitzur. Yivarich b'tchilak says sukar. You make a bracha on a little bit of sugar because sugar, candies are not meal foods and they would require a bracha of yifter yayin sarif and you pater up the yayin sarif. Now, note 17.7 of the Mishnah Berurah, that usually on Shabbos, you make Kiddush right beforehand, and when you make a bracha on wine, we know wine paters all liquids. So if you made a Kiddush on a wine, then you don't have to worry about this, because schnapps is a liquid, and you don't have to worry. It's only going to be if you're having schnapps in a non-wine meal, then what? Then you have to pater up the bracha due to these suffix. Some of the practices dip a little bread into the liquor to avoid the suffix. Another way to get out of it, ayin machzah shekel. Sif gimel and here it goes. You're in the middle of a meal, and what are you going to eat? You want to eat peiros v'loibas. You want to have fruit. This is not part of a meal. Peiros are eaten for hunger. Peiros are eaten for gishmak. Even if it was on the table, you have to make a bracha rishayna on it. And of course not. Why? Because you're going to bench. If you don't want to eat any fruit without bread, but you're eating a rock in my pass, eating it with the bread is not a problem. Came to Tfeilim la'apas, because it's part of the bread, it's tuffle to the bread, and you don't have to make a bracha. First, eat without the bread. And make a bracha on that fruit. And then, you can have some with the bread, etc. Now you have a problem. And you have a serious problem. Says the Kitzur between courses. What do you eat? Is a palate cleanser, a pickled olive, pickled lemon, stone radish, if you're eating it to clean you out, that's called part of the Suda. Makes you eat more. And this is, of course, the Hakdama to desserts, as we're middle of learning that when it comes to fruit, candy, you got to make a bracha. We'll pick it up from here. B'siyata dishmaya.